listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
It is the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross, alongside our general manager, Mark Dominik, back home in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm here in Las Vegas. And, Mark, we know that the teams are in New Orleans. They have arrived down there in the Big Easy. And we know Monday being media day, or media night, if you will. It feels like here we haven't seen any change in the numbers. 1.5 here for the Chiefs. Still favored. That total sitting at 49. Now that the teams are there in New Orleans, and once they get through the media obligations, can anything really change for your handicap here when you look at this game coming up on Sunday? Or is it kind of, we know what we know, and barring something unforeseen, hopefully everything goes off without a hitch this week in New Orleans, it's pretty much cemented, and that's why we're not seeing these numbers really change.
Yeah, there's a couple things I think, Dave. When I think about the numbers not moving and not changing, it feels like I don't feel like the bettors are in this game yet. I don't feel like the big money's kind of pushed its way through. Feels early still. I think when I look at this one, I look at the offensive line for the Eagles and how critical that is. And, Cam Jurgens and certainly Landon Dickerson are really instrumental people in terms of getting things done in the middle of the field. And so I want to wait till Wednesday's injury report and kind of see exactly what their status was. Was it DNP, did not participate, or was it at least limited participation? I don't need to see full participation. That doesn't make me nervous, but I would like to see limited participation just to know that they're on the field and it sounds like they're ready to go for game time. And I think once we see that, I think you'll start to see more money push into this game. And I think it'll also give people maybe more confidence to whether they could put the money on the Eagles, but also maybe moving that number in terms of over-under higher. Because right now, that still seems low, but maybe I'm getting suckered into an overs playoff because we've had a lot of overs this season. So it just feels like everything's over. But, I think that a lot hinges for me in 2 days from now after that injury report comes out for Wednesday.
Yeah, I know that, like, if you're backing on, Saquon Barkley in your prop market to, get over 117.5 yards or score a touchdown or two, it is incumbent upon that offensive line to make sure that they are healthy. Like, that could change an opinion, right, Mark? If it's not what you're looking for come Wednesday, I think we're all assuming it's going to be okay because they gutted it out in that Commanders NFC title game, but yet it's, no disrespect to DC, it's Chris Jones, it's Carl Loftus, it's a different front that they're going to have to face. And if those guys are not healthy, Mark, that could be a hidden issue here for the Eagles, right?
Yeah, and I think for me also, as much as if you like the line, you want to jump on it before it moves, that's one thing, But as a forward GM, and you've heard this from me before, when you got done with practice, it wasn't like I ran upstairs to the head coach goes, did you see so-and-so's practice today? Or what'd you think of? I went to the training room. Are we healthy? How did it go? And so even a Wednesday and a Thursday might be mid-pace or, maybe it's just shells or, running around, no hitting. You could still tweak an ankle. You could still sadly pop an Achilles. You could still have an injury where an ACL, and it changes a lot of things in a heartbeat. So for me, closer to the game is a little bit more safe for me. I think that's why I'm not afraid of the over-under right now, but I wonder if the line's going to change a little bit as we get closer to the game. If the Eagles can maintain the health that it looks like they're going to have going into this one.
Yeah, we've seen some bizarre things. I mean, go back to last year, Drake Greenlaw just, getting ready to go back out there for another series and, just getting up and down on his toes and boom, pops his Achilles. That could change the game. Barrett Robbins, remember, this Super Bowl very well when Tampa Bay beat Oakland back in the day. He just went MIA the night before the Super Bowl. We saw this with Eugene Robinson, where he gets an arrest the night before the Super Bowl. He did play in the game, but all those teams ended up losing, by the way, all those examples we're giving. Now that they're down in New Orleans, and I guess for Kansas City, this is 3 years in a row, it's Andy Reid, it's Patrick Mahomes. We don't expect anything crazy like that. And it's the second time in 3 years for Philadelphia. So even they kind of feel like been there and done that. Because of that, is that why we really, barring the injury report, the unforeseen, we feel like these teams are pretty professional in the way they conduct themselves?
Yeah, you really can't go into they don't have the experience the other team has. Obviously, Kansas City, 3 straight, potential Super Bowl championships. That's a lot of experience. But, the Eagles being there back to, almost back to back is huge. It's tremendous for them, especially for their quarterback. that he's got another opportunity to lead this team back into the post, or not through the postseason, but to the Super Bowl for Jalen Hurts and company. And so I think that each team has their own set of rookies that are new to this year, but they've been able to handle the defensive side for Philadelphia, with Quinyon Mitchell and certainly Cooper DeJean and what they've been able to do this year. I just don't think this game's going to be too big for those guys. Right? I feel like they're going to be able to handle it and be comfortable. And I think because we can't talk about the experience factor, I think I just go right to the health of the teams and look and see exactly where that sits. It looks like Joe Thuney's going to play left tackle again for Kansas City, but we're going to be able to see how the rest of the offensive line really holds up. Especially on the right side, where I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out for them in Kansas City. That's some area that I would be looking at as a former advanced scout. I look at the right side and see if I can take advantage of maybe there with Kansas City. On the Eagles front, it's understanding Saquon. But, A.J. Brown hasn't been heavily involved this postseason. I'd like to keep that the same. I'll give up the Zach Ertz. And certainly know that Saquon's, but I can just avoid, A.J. Brown ripping one of those 80-yard touchdowns because his lower body strength's so good. I just want that not to happen. So it's, it's a game where everybody's in New Orleans, everybody's preparing. It's a busy week, but it's an amazing week. It's just that Kansas City's walking in probably with the assumption of like, hey, we're going to get this because we've done it before. And Philly's walking in going, we want revenge. We want another shot at this. But I don't think they have the same level of confidence like Kansas City's walking in with.
I think Zach Ertz had about 1,000 receptions for the Commanders last week. But look, it could be a big game for Dallas Goedert and Travis Kelce, the tight ends. It'll be interesting to see the way they attack it. As you mentioned, maybe keep A.J. Brown, right? Keep A.J. Brown isolated and take him out of the game. It could be a Dallas Goedert game on the inside, to your point. So those tight ends could really play a big role. We mentioned the media day, that it is now on Monday night. It used to be traditionally on Tuesday back in the day. Back in our day, it was on Tuesdays for media day. What about the NFL moving that up? Is that a kind of a way to get it over with even earlier in the week so that the teams really can then turn about the business of playing the football game and preparing for it?
Well, I do like that, but I like you better as a host because when I said Zach Ertz, I'm thinking back when Zach Ertz was drafted by, he's like, I was GM. And I'll give you a quick story since we're in this, and since I botched the name, and so I'll just own that. I remember going back to Philly a couple of years after I was in media. I was doing SiriusXM NFL radio training camp, and we get Zach Ertz to come over, and he's like, "That was the most intimidating combine interview I've ever been a part of," because we turned the lights off and just put like one light on right at his face as if he's getting interrogated, because he's such a good guy that we wanted to see what would it be like if he felt like under pressure. He still remembered it. So that's where Zach Ertz and Philly always get wrapped together, even though I know it's Goddard. Again, I just want Dallas Goedert to be limited in terms of his production. But, it was hilarious. Zach was like, man, I'd never sweated so bad. And like, well, we just did it because you're such a good kid that we're like, what else can we do to kind of shake this guy up a little bit? Anyway, so that's that story. But as for the media and the media tonight for Monday night, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's better for the team to be able to get in and get those things done because I think it's just part of the Super Bowl that makes it the Super Bowl, right? But at the same point, it's nice for a player to wake up tomorrow and not have to worry about like, what time do we have to be at the bus and what time do we have to be over there and how long are we at the podium or how long do we walk around? Because remember, not every player gets to sit at the podium. Some guys are just standing around, they're bored off their tail, like no one's talking to them, right? You might be the backup, whatever, the backup left tackle and no one talks to you because you're like, he's not playing probably. So what's the point? And so I like that it gets out of the way tonight and that the team can really kind of focus on getting the week organized. So trainers, health, nutrition, getting yourself ready. It's red light therapy, all the different things players are doing to get themselves ready for a week. They're able to start that on Tuesday and get the media part, which I enjoy still, out of the way.
From an executive's perspective, because you guys are down there with all the players, obviously, and really they're talking to the players and the coaching staffs. Did you guys get inundated with questions too? Like they're like, Mark, I want to ask you about, like, is that even for Howie Roseman? Does he have to be on alert that like they're going to be looking to Howie to talk to him too?
Oh, absolutely. It just depends if Howie wants to go or not, right? Really, the coaches are fair game. And, they try to catch you in just like funny, like weird questions. I was safe. I was director of pro personnel for Tampa Bay back when we won the Super Bowl. And I think I went just to kind of see the environment, but no one was running with a microphone going, I want to talk to this, 30-year-old guy and see what he thinks about this situation. No, I was just able to take it in as a member of the staff, not as a member under the gun.
Yeah, for Andy, certainly, and for Sirianni, I wonder for Sirianni if it's a little bit more like they're going to try to get me, right? They try to prod me because Sirianni seems like the type that could take the bait, if you will. Andy Reid, been there, done that. I mean, come on, 3 in a row. You're not going to get Andy Reid off guard in a media day, right?
Yeah, you had to come up with one heck of a good question that he's never heard before. After all the years of him being a coach and, the opportunity to be at big games and certainly, Super Bowls, he's been hit with a lot of the tough ones. So I can't imagine you get Andy Reid off his game at all.
For a guy like Sirianni, because look, and I'm not trying to pick at Nick at all. And I'm really trying to come around on him and give him his flowers for the job he's done in 2 of the last 3 years. But I do wonder if people read where their team is mentally by their head coach. And if they seem high-strung, maybe the team's a little bit high-strung. If he's relaxed, like we assume Andy Reid's going to be, maybe the team takes on more of that persona. Is there anything to read into that when people watch these media days?
No, not really. I mean, it's how the players react. You're the coach. The coach is so used to answering questions, right? Like even an off-the-wall one, are you an apple or an orange and why, right? That's just an off-the-wall question that people ask it. Wanting to see what they say. And I think Sirianni doesn't fall to those traps, and nor should any head coach. You just be like, apple a day, right? You just kind of run with it, but you don't get long. The longer winded you get in these answers, the more you get yourself in trouble, or you become a soundbite or a meme very quickly in this new universe that we live in. So, it's a fun night. I'll be interested to see some of the random questions, but it's still a great opportunity for these guys to be able to present themselves, because a lot of guys don't get to the podium. A lot of these players, this is their one time they really do get to the podium, as we usually put the coordinators and coaches out, or the quarterback out, but not usually maybe the left tackle or a chance for the starting quarter to talk.
Keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS. That's all you got to do. Sirianni, they try to get you in a trap. Just, I love apples. On to the next. There you go. When we come back, there was a massive trade in the NBA, Mark. I want to get your thoughts on it from an executive perspective next here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We continue the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik. And Mark, it was a blockbuster in the NBA. And look, if you're a Laker fan, you're like, man, we're used to this stuff, right? We got Lou Alcindor back before he was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We made a draft day trade for Kobe Bryant back in the day. So, it's not they went out and got LeBron James. It's not for them. It's not necessarily from a historical perspective. This is what the Lakers do. They get a 25-year-old superstar in Luka Doncic. For the Mavericks, it might be different. You're waking up in Dallas going, what did we do? We got Anthony Davis. We got rid of Luka? Who authorized this? And that's why I want to pick your brain as an executive, Mark, because we are being told that this was just GM to GM. That conversation, no other teams were notified about it. We know Utah had to be a part of it to make the money work and that sort of thing from a logistics standpoint. But as far as a who for who, it was, we want Anthony Davis. Are you interested in Luka Doncic? Yes, where do I sign? In the NFL, Mark, this doesn't happen this way, does it? Or it's just in kind of the cloud of night, and we take care of this deal, and then everybody wakes up the next day and goes, what in the world happened? That is not normal in the NFL.
Not anymore. Not in modern NFL. Maybe back when Parcells might have been the head coach who was like, I'm tired of this guy and he's out of here. That kind of a moment. But the modern NFL, no, that doesn't happen. Ownership obviously needs to know. Certainly, you want to have a conversation with your head coach. I mean, it's one of your best players. It's trying to think of a prime example, but it's like, hey, look, we've really enjoyed Zay Flowers, but we don't want him here anymore. So instead of telling Coach Harbaugh, I'm just going to trade Zay Flowers and tell Harbaugh, hey, we're just we're working on our building and making sure we have the right culture here. And Harbaugh would come into your office and rip you to shreds. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? Now, I do think a couple things. I don't feel like they got the value. Even though, I think a lot of people feel that way. A reminder that a lot of people don't realize that first rounders not till 2029. So it's not like you've got
29.
is this is a good draft class for the NBA. I do kind of try to follow a little bit of sports, and this is actually going to be a much better draft class this year than last year. But that pick is until 2029, and so you're basically telling me as a if you're a Mavericks fan, that there's so much going on behind the scenes that you don't like about Luka, that's why you're going to get rid of him. And we don't know what all that could be. And certainly they're saying, hey, look, when that comes to that max contract, we're not going to do that. And so we'd rather get some value now and see what happens. And so I don't love the logistics. I don't like putting the coach out there in front of everybody when he had nothing to do with it. I think that's a separate press conference maybe. Certainly the GM was taking all the bullets for what was going on. But again, very rare that it would go down this way. I still think Redick knew at the Lakers what's going on. I don't believe that he would just be in the dark and just be like, "Oh yeah, wow, look what just happened." I think he's a bright enough guy that you can tell him, "Hey, look, we got a chance of doing this, but we can't tell anybody or anything. You with me, coach?" And the coach would be like, "Yes, that's how we do things. We communicate." And so the lack of communication I thought was very unique, and why the Lakers specifically is also unique. But we see that trade, but that is such a one-off, rare situation. It's, in 3 years from now, we're going to know who won it. Right now, it looks obviously like the Lakers did, but 3 years from now, I think we'll tell a lot about what Luka Doncic is in the NBA with the Lakers.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating from your perspective. From he was set to get the Supermax deal in Dallas. Luka assumed he'd be a Maverick for life, and now that Supermax deal goes away when you go to a new team in LA. So that monetary movings that you're doing there for Dallas does make some sense if he's not the guy. Mark, the way I read it too was Luka, he's not in shape all the time. We're just being blunt about it. And, it was almost to me like a way the organization said, we've told you over and over and over, do not use the regular season to get in shape. We need you in shape when you get here. And even though we got to the finals last year with you, we're going to make this move. And it felt like a subliminal message, or maybe not subliminal anymore, that we don't trust you to do the right thing with your body. Did you ever have a player like that? And I know there's clauses in NFL contracts about weight and stipulations of you meet this, we'll pay you this. Is there another way to deal with a player other than dealing them if you cannot get the guy to be the body type that you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, you for me in the NFL, it's writing in clauses into their contract, like you said. I did that with a couple players. Most notably was Donald Penn, our left tackle, who, was a great player. We found him off Minnesota's practice squad, brought him in. He became a starter at left tackle for us. And I loved him. Loved the tenacity, the toughness, and loved his story, but he had athleticism. And we get to a long negotiation, and I'm saying to the agent, I can't do this. We've got to do some type of weight clause. And somewhere, some article came out that basically said that I'd called him fat or something like that, which I don't remember if that's certainly the Reddit. As good a relationship I had with Donald Penn, I saw him on the field because we were still in the middle of trying to get stuff worked out. And he came over, he was just yelling and screaming. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. But in the end, he did do the deal. We got a 6-year deal with him with weight clauses. And I truly believe, he goes on afterwards and continues to play in the NFL after us. I truly believe the weight clauses helped him prolong his career and play to the level he can play. And we would I think we had 6 or 8 check-ins with us. So it couldn't be just one of those, in February, you've got to weigh, under 340. And then by the time the season's around, you're 362 or whatever it is. So with Donald Penn, it was a very unique situation. The other way to kind of work into it is off-season bonus, in terms of making it significant enough that he's going to be part of the program. I did that with Darrelle Revis. I sliced off $1.5 million out of his 16 per year and said, you got to be here in the offseason to get $1.5 million because I wanted him in the building with the young players, with everybody else, and working together. So I wanted to make it significant. So didn't give him any signing bonus, didn't give him any guaranteed money, but gave him 1.5 if you show up in the offseason to make sure you're part of this. I think with Luka, I think that they felt the same way. They felt like probably he wasn't, to your point, taking care of the asset that makes the money. And now he's lost a lot of money. It sounds like from your understanding of the NBA salary cap, which is a little stronger than mine, that, he's cost himself a bunch of money too.
It's fascinating. Again, I was there in D.C. with Albert Hainsworth, if people remember that scenario, and I was there early for training camps. They'd run him out there for this conditioning test, and I saw it, so I had my camera guy record it, and they came over and Gestapo'd me, they turn that camera, you can't use that. I'm like, The guy's failing a physical test. I'm watching it. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. This is part of the contract. So these things are real things. I know people don't like to talk about it, but maybe he'll be in the best shape of his life in LA. And like you did with Donald Penn, could be the best thing that ever happened to Luka Doncic in LA. Maybe the best thing for Kellen Moore is waiting. He didn't get the head coaching job in Dallas a couple of years ago when everybody thought maybe he would be in line there. Went to LA, did not work out 1 year in LA. They got rid of that whole coaching staff. It's worked out pretty darn well in Philly, and it looks like he might not have to leave New Orleans if he doesn't want to. He could stay after the Super Bowl and just get his new offices there at the Superdome with the Saints. Is it a foregone conclusion in your mind that it will be Kellen Moore to get the last vacancy in New Orleans?
Yeah, it is. Everything's shut down. It's been very quiet. You haven't heard any new names coming through or anything like that. So everything's aligned for Kellen Moore to become the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints and, see what he can do with Derek Carr and company. They've got a tough cap situation that, is going to be a lot to battle through. But they'll get Chris Olave back, which is obviously a nice chip to hopefully get him back and have him be healthy for a full season and run from there. But, these jobs are hard to get, right? There's only 32 of them in the world. Sometimes your name's really hot and sometimes it falls apart, right? And you just don't know when to strike or when not to. I think for Kellen Moore, he obviously felt like this was a great opportunity, great timing, and where, other coaches might have said this isn't the perfect fit right now. Kellen Moore's grabbing it, and kudos to him. Like, if you feel like you can win there, that's great. I mean, obviously it's a very stable organization. Mickey Loomis is the longest tenured GM in the NFL. And so you feel like you've got, stability there within the building. Now it's just a matter of, can we get some consistency on the team on the field?
Well, I'm fascinated by that because we're seeing different examples across the league where a coach is hired before the GM, right? New York, we saw that at Aaron Glenn, right? We see it other ways. Normally, maybe it's a new GM that's brought in. Did they get the autonomy to hire the new head coach, even though they're new to the situation as well? You mentioned it, these jobs are so rare, both coach and GM, and you know this as one of those guys that have one of the rarest jobs in the world. What are you looking for? If you're an established GM like you are, is like it's got to fit my vision for this football team, or could you say, "Ooh, younger coach, Kellen Moore, never done it," or Ben Johnson, I can go with this new philosophy, this new mentality of a coach. How important is it that the GM and the head coach are on the same page from day one?
Well, I think it's critical. I mean, it's obviously, it doesn't, the GM having to hire the coach or vice versa, the coach can be part of the GM. So I think it's healthy, but all the way around. I think it's probably the cleaner way to do it no matter what, just because of the simple fact that that's what I think is best for those kind of situations. Because, again, you're going to have to work together on everything, right? It's critical that you're on the same page. I think at D'Amico Ryan's, like, being able to be around him and what he's like, if I would have been, brought in after D'Amico, I'd be like, I'd love to work with this guy, right? He's a great guy. Like, he's an unbelievable person. And so, you see it in Jacksonville, right? They're kind of doing it the opposite way where it's Liam Owen, and now they're looking for the GM. And that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that because the reality is you're coming together, unlike the Mavericks, you're coming together on to build the team together. You're not going, hey, look, I'm going to go pick this player and you guys just deal with it. Like, that's not how it works. Never. There were times where I saw negotiations in a draft room, right? And those negotiations were like, well, if I get this player, you get that player. And it went down that way. And both players failed because that's just not how it works. But then when you try to do it that way, it's a terrible match. So you can't put the proverbial square peg in a round hole. That's just what happens. So you got to be working together, but it doesn't, to me, it's like, well, the GM has to be and hire the head coach, and that way there's a structure. Well, no, the ownership understands the dynamics between the two of them. And the goal is that you're seeing the communication between ownership in those guys or those people creating this football team.
That is so fascinating to me because I'm so old school. I think, no, Mark's got to be the GM. He's got to hire the coach. And you're like, no. If the coach is there and I came in and it's, like you gave a great example in Houston, we'll make that work. It really is about the personalities and, kind of being co-leaders, if you will. I know the head coach is going to be leading that team at the field level, but you're leading at the front office. As long as those two guys see eye to eye, it should be a successful marriage there for GM and head coach. Fascinating the way that can go down. Mark, when we come back, we've got some potential quarterback moves in the NFL I want to discuss, and a former head coach is back in the NFL. We'll discuss next year on the GM Show.
listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle. Dave Ross and Mark Dominik, and even though we are recording this on a Monday, breaking news we get in the middle of our show here, Mark, and it's rather significant news coming out of Cleveland because Myles Garrett, of course, with former number 1 pick overall in the NFL draft, has been a stalwart at defensive end for the Browns for a number of years, says he wants out. He says publicly, I want out. I can't be complacent, and we can't win here. I'm paraphrasing. In Cleveland. So it's time for me to move on because his competitive spirit says I want to win, Mark. So if I want to win, I want to do it elsewhere because it's not going to happen here in Cleveland. This is ironic because it comes on the heels of Andrew Berry, the GM, who was just asked about a week ago, hey, if somebody approached you and said, we'll give you 2 number 1s for Myles Garrett, what would your answer be? And basically said the answer would be no. Mark, that seems like an odd question to have been asked. And then a week later, that same player says, I want out. Is there anything here? Or is this just coincidental that Barry's like, dude, we're not trading away our star, and you can ask and say 2 number 1s, and I'm not interested. Does the equation change now that the star player says, yes, I actually want to be dealt?
There's a lot of parts here that are unfolding quickly, and it makes me as a former GM, here's the trick, right? With Myles Garrett, if you decide to acquiesce and say, hey, look, we're going to move Myles Garrett, where does that train stop? Like, what player is like, well, I want out too, or if he doesn't, I want out. Like, it just becomes this thing like, hey, that's not how it works. Like, we're going to get through this and we're going to figure this out together as a group. We signed you, Myles, for 5 years, $125 million. You still have a couple of years on that contract. You're really not going to be a free agent for at least 2 more seasons. Where's your commitment to, the situation we signed you to? This one, I think it's all happenstance. I'm trying to remember if Myles Garrett went to the Pro Bowl over the weekend, but certainly usually what's happening right now is postseason play, right? And Myles Garrett's sitting at home and he's watching teams and he's watching Kansas City going, what the heck? Like, how great would that be, right? And sometimes you forget about that, right? You're caught up in securing the bag, which is fine, but when the career gets later in their career, that ring becomes all more important than how much money did you make? Like, did I get a Super Bowl ring? And so I think Myles Garrett's kind of looking at this picture, going, we're in really a mess with the contract situation here at the quarterback position. It just doesn't feel like anything's coming together. What I would do in this situation is I would call his agent, which I think was Bus Cook. I think it still might be. I assume it is. And talk to him. Kevin Stefanski, I'd get him on the phone with Myles Garrett and just kind of like, what's going on? Like, I understand. Let me hear you out. Like, let him vent his frustrations, right? Because he is mad and frustrated. And let him kind of get whatever he's got to get off his shoulders and try to explain to him, where we still can go from here and what we still can do. And let's not overreact right now to, that one situation. So again, you've got to decide as a GM, are you going to go down this road and be able to let players go, or that's a special exemption, but it doesn't include you or you, a good player, or you good player, your offensive line. It's like whoever. Joel Bitonio's like, I want to go win a state championship. I want out of here. So do I, or, whoever. Wyatt Teller's like, hey, we're leaving. We're both of us guards. We want to leave too. So it's a really delicate spot to be in. And yes, Myles Garrett can say whatever he wants, right? Andrew Berry's probably going to have to come out pretty strong and say it's not happening. And you're going to field, probably 25 phone calls like what it would take. What would it take? Because if you're a good pro department, you should call Cleveland today and say, if you guys are doing something, just keep me posted, but I'd like to know what you're thinking. And they can sit there and say to 25 teams, nope. But, it's a very interesting situation that they've got themselves in right before the Super Bowl.
I'm just going back last year to Hassan Reddick, right? Where Reddick is basically like, deal me. And they're like, no. Like we don't have to do anything. And that is such an interesting point, though, that you bring up from a front office perspective of, if we cave to this player, then where does it end? And look, Myles Garrett is not, just any player. This is a former number 1 pick. We understand that. He spent substantial time in Cleveland. But at what point do we empower the player to just say, I want out. I can go back to Eli Manning on draft day where the Chargers drafted him. And basically, the family said, Arch down to Eli, said, we're not playing for you. And that's different because we haven't played at all for you. And then they did get their trade. And obviously, Eli was dealt to the Giants. And we saw how that trade worked out and draft picks and LaDainian Tomlinson and all the moving parts that happened then. But that was draft day trade. So it's a little bit different. I can even remember, and I'm sure you do too, John Elway, when he was drafted with the Baltimore Colts. And I'm not going to play there. Maybe some say if Elway had played in Baltimore, they'd still be the Baltimore Colts. And maybe they would have never left. But, of course, then Elway famously forced that trade to Denver, and the rest is history. Where is that fine line? Is it if you're a drafted player because we have no equity with you in our city, in our fan base, maybe we can acquiesce a little bit more to those demands. But if you're an entrenched player, a guy that we've given the bag to, as you mentioned, a guy that we value as our cornerstone player, sorry, Myles, you don't get the opportunity to pick. This is how it works in the NFL. It's a frustrating time. We all get that. But we want you to be a part of the solution and not a guy that just says, I want out because the getting's getting a little bit too tough and rough here in Cleveland.
Yeah, there's multiple things as I think through this. Go back to the draft. The new CBA's kind of cleaned that up. So whatever pick you are, if you're the fourth pick in the draft, your name is that you're allocated that much money in your rookie negotiating pool. So if you say, well, I don't want to be here, I want to be the 10th pick after the fact, well, you're going to move to the 10th pick. Now the 10th pick's going to go to the fourth pick, but the fourth pick doesn't have the money because they got the 10th pick money. So the NFL kind of stopped or tried to stop that from happening. You can do it pre-draft trade, but once you pick a guy at, especially higher in the draft, if you pick a guy at 16 and you trade back, you're like, hey, he decides, I don't want to play here. I'm going to play with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're 29th or 30th. Sorry, it doesn't work. Financially it can't work. You have to be willing to take a lot less money to do that. So those are, and I remember those specifically. I think about more recently Trent Williams.
Yes.
When he was with the Commanders, right? And Bruce Allen was the general manager, my former boss. And Bruce was like, you know what? Take your bag and go home. Like, you're just not going to play. I mean, that's your, you got to be internally tough enough to say, you know what, Myles Garrett, if you show up, you show up. But if you don't, you're never playing football again. And I control your rights and I can stop you from ever playing football again. That's how deep you've got to decide how you're going to dig. Bruce Allen dug in and said, hey, Trent Williams, you're never playing football again, right? That's just kind of what, and then obviously Trent found a way to get to San Francisco and, he did get to play football and he's been a machine in the NFL for all these years. So that's where you've got to decide, how deep you want it. So that's where I think the coaches got to get it on there and unpack and really get to Myles Garrett and talk. And I think this is the same thing with Andrew Berry. This is where I would go fly to Myles Garrett and talk to him about like, hey, look, I'm not going to put you in the draft meeting. I'm not going to put you in free agency, but here's some of the things we've got going on here, which is why you're still so critical. And I know you're frustrated. Like, agree with him. Simple says, like, do you think you don't think I don't realize that I could be fired next year if we don't win? Like, a lot of things could change. So I think you just got to, I think he's got to understand that there may not be another option. Like, it is what it is. And at the same point, you've got to try to find a way to, kind of bridge this back together where, he can save face now because he's put himself out there. And now he's got to, if he's going to retract it, he's got to come up with why and how you're going to do that, because that's the one hard thing when a player jumps out in the media and says something that sometimes it's hard to, come back from underneath that shell that you already opened up.
And maybe you wouldn't even get off of those 2 first-round picks knowing the player wants out. So the leverage could be even different in the trade market if you do actively try to trade him. And your Andrew Berry, even like the Le'Veon Bell situation was over a contract. He wanted out. They lost a whole year. We saw how that worked out. Didn't work out very well for Le'Veon too. So many different things. But normally it's about contract. Normally it's not about team. So this is a very interesting one. And as you mentioned, very delicate situation there in Cleveland. We'll keep an eye on that. We mentioned that we had a former head coach in the league, Chip Kelly. People might have already forgot his days in Philadelphia and San Francisco. Back in the NFL, is going to join Pete Carroll, become the offensive coordinator now for this new Raiders staff. Of course, he just won a national championship a couple weeks ago with Ohio State as the offensive coordinator under Ryan Day. What do you make of Chip coming back to the NFL? And is football, and he runs the football. That's what he likes to do, and it's not going to be different no matter which level it is.
Well, I mean, I think it's nice that you've got somebody so experienced to call plays. I mean, that's the one thing you've got. You've got a guy that has had a taste of the NFL in multiple spots and, understands what the commitment is, but has never really got a chance to be an offensive coordinator really in the National Football League. And I think it just fully focused on that only where, you don't have to be the head coach. You don't have to worry about the 53, that you can just focus on that side of the ball. I think getting out of the college game in terms of the craziness of the portal and NILs and the collective and all that recruiting and moving guys in and out, that could be frustrating. He went and he proved his point that he still knows how to get the game together and get things done. And now he has a chance to, see if he can fix what's going on with the Raiders and the quarterback situation, how to create more competition around Aiden O'Connell. And, for Pete Carroll, you get, a very established person where Pete Carroll could be the head coach and, oversee and look over in those areas of this offensive side, but not be worried that he's got to, babysit or really help fix anything because he knows that Chip Kelly's been there, done it.
Okay, very quickly to that point, Russell Wilson says, I want to stay in Pittsburgh, but Pete Carroll, could there be a reunion between those two guys back in their Seattle days? Would Chip Kelly have a say in that now as the OC and say, you know what? Maybe Justin Fields would look better in silver and black than a Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I think Chip Kelly's certainly going to be involved in that, right? There's been a lot of people through Seattle since Russell Wilson left. Some people that have moved on to different places. They have a pretty good sense of exactly how that breakup went in Seattle and whether or not where Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson stood or did not stand based off of that information. As for Russell Wilson, he's playing it the right way. I'm focused on Pittsburgh, right? That's the right play because it sounds good. It also, what if the word came out that there wasn't interest? That just kind of hurts him. I think the Steelers are still trying to find a way to get Russell Wilson done long term. And part of me thinks that Russell Wilson might rather stay in Pittsburgh than go out to the Raiders. I think the things that are in Pittsburgh that aren't working right now, I think are very fixable in terms of getting a couple more new players on the roster. But defensively, I think they're close. I think Pittsburgh's a lot closer than people realize, and I think Russell sees that versus where the Raiders sit today.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Steeler football this year, maybe more than I should have. And I didn't feel like that 3 was the problem in Pittsburgh at the quarterback position. It felt like there were a lot of other things going on, maybe the offensive line and the running game and the wide receiving core that could be addressed first. When we come back, let's talk about money for a wide receiver, big money. That's next year on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
It is the GM Shuffle presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik. And Mark, I'm always fascinated when you look at money, how you're going to build your roster and how much we're going to spend. And I don't want this to sound disrespectful on a wide receiver. Okay, not just any wide receiver. We get it. It's Ja'Marr Chase. Guy is a stud, right? This is why when they got Joe Burrow out of LSU, they said, let's get you your college teammate. And that has worked out. I don't think anybody's going to have a debate about whether or not Ja'Marr Chase, Joe Burrow, if that was the right executive decisions to make. Nailed it. But my question now is, Mark, he says this, and I'll quote, at the end of the day, Ja'Marr, on his new deal, I just hope I get what's fair. Now, what is fair? He said, fair is what I deserve. I can't really say what I want to say, but it's what I deserve and what I've worked for and how hard I've worked for it. So he can't even say what he really wants to say. That's the part that I'd be like, what do you really want to say? So what is fair in Ja'Marr Chase's eyes might not be the same that's fair in your eyes as a GM. How do you strike that balance with a clear star player?
Well, I'll try to decode without talking to Ja'Marr Chase what he means by fair. And he can't even say. He knows what his market value. He's going to be 35 to 40 million a year. He doesn't want to leave Joe Burrow. I don't think at all. So, in terms of I think they feel like they can win there, and I think they could. I think they'll be back at the playoff hunt for sure next year. Almost no debate about it. The problem is he knows that he's going against the Bengals, and they are notoriously tougher to deal with and negotiate against, as you can tell with Ja'Marr and not really talking shop with T. Higgins, you're playing it all the way out. Usually, the Joe Burrow one was a surprise for me when they did Joe Burrow. Because of the injury history, I was like, well, the Bengals will probably make him play another year, but they didn't. They said the quarterback's different, but everybody else in that team has a different mindset. If you're going to go into early to try to get a deal done, you're expected to take a massive discount or just go play it out. That's just kind of their mentality. So I think he's worried about fair being yeah, the Bengals will offer you $30 million a year, but the fair market value is 37 or 30, 36, 38, somewhere in that range. And that's tough. And I think that's what he's worried about, that, he's had to, go through the gauntlet, and he's still not getting the fair deal. Players know it. You get drafted by Cincinnati, you know it. It's just reality. And everybody around the league knows it. Agents know it, that it's a tougher place to go to kind of get through your deals. And because you're winning, you're not pulling a Myles Garrett where you're like, I want out of here. Well, no, you got Joe Burrow. No one wants to leave. There's every guy on defense wants to have Joe Burrow on the team, right? So it's kind of like a place where now it's a destination, even though you realize you're up against, negotiations. That all being said, it's going to be tough on him. And I think he's trying to be politically correct and being respectful to the organization, knowing that it's going to be an uphill climb.
They're cheap, right? That's the word on the street for the Bengals. It's cheap. We're going to always try to get our guys on the cheap.
I think they're cheap. I think they're frugal. So I think they'll pay. They'll pay when they have to get to that point. Your team, Dallas, I know Dallas takes care of their guys. For the most part, they're going to just pay their guys. And everybody gets drafted by Dallas goes, hey, look, you're a good player. Jerry's going to pay you. You just said, if Cincinnati, you know that you're probably going to have to play the deal out, and you might have to play a tag year before you actually really get paid true market value. It's just kind of known. So they're very frugal about where they spend it. They'll spend it. They almost have to, but they'll spend it, and they'll do signing bonuses and things like that. But it is a very frugal organization.
Now, you're so much more delicate and PC than I am. That's why you are a GM and I'm not. Mark, when I look at T. Higgins, and you brought that up, and I think it's a great kind of feeder here from Jamar Chase, that you assume Jamar will get taken care of if they can work out the money. They can't pay T. Higgins, right? So he's gone, we would assume, right? Is that a bad assumption on my part? Is there any way imaginable that they can keep both these guys in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow?
I don't think it's possible. I just don't think, not when you're talking about guys that are in the $30 million a year mark, and you've got a $50-something million quarterback. I mean, that's just between three players. You've got, almost half at least 40% of your salary cap, depending on what the number is. But, 30, and 50. I mean, you can't do the math. It just doesn't work that way, which is frustrating, but it is what it is. I'll be interested to watch teams continue to build their football teams in the salary cap era. Thankfully, the cap's really exploded. When I was GM, the cap stayed pretty much constant all 5 years. It didn't even move. For 5 years, we pretty much sat around $110 million. It made it very difficult. When you made a bad decision, you were in a lot of trouble, right? Because you just couldn't come out of it. Now you can see clubs can go into a decision and go, well, I don't know if we should have signed that Carson Wentz for that much money. Let's cut him and just move on, right? But this Jared Goff thing, we're going to go in a different direction. You've seen people be able to walk away from contracts. You're like, wow, never could you have done that a decade ago, but you can now. But when I look at the way that the teams are building teams, clearly for T. Higgins, if I'm his agent, I'm calling to all the teams that have the young quarterback that are on their rookie deals, because they're going to have more space, right? The other thing is I'm going to obviously reach out to the teams that are looking for that number one. I just wonder if clubs will start to, because of what happened at running back this year, with the Derrick Henry, obviously with Saquon Barkley, et cetera, if more money shouldn't go back into the running back pool and more money get pulled out of wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3, meaning we're not paying those guys much money anymore. We shouldn't pay $10 for wide receiver 3, or 8 to 10 or whatever it is, 7 to 8, 9, 10. And wide receiver 2, shouldn't be the 20 to 25 or whatever it might be, 15. Because if you think about the draft, that's the one position that just every year, there's kids that come through. And maybe things will change a little bit for wide receiver market. Still good news for T. Higgins. I'm not worried about his thing, but I just wonder if GMs will start to kind of look at this and go, wait a second, maybe we should get a little more money in that basket for the running backs. Because, maybe we get 2 or 3 years out of that instead of let's go buy wide receiver 3. Let's go draft wide receiver 3. And the Ravens kind of have that mentality. If you watch the Ravens, how they built this team over time, that they don't really love to spend money on their wide receivers. They might now with Zay Flowers, but that's a rare bird for them. Usually they try to cycle through that. And I think that's obviously showing a lot coming out of Baltimore.
When I look back even last year, right, DJ Moore became the highest paid Bear in the history of Chicago. Think about that. DJ Moore, highest paid Chicago Bear of all time, but it was on that rookie deal with Caleb Williams, right? So that matches exactly what you're talking about here from a roster construction. Could we then, by that logic, say Jaden Daniels, Washington, D.C., Cliff Kingsbury, you put a T. Higgins on that roster opposite Terry McLaurin, pick your poison for 1 and 1A? Does that feel like the type of landing spot for a T. Higgins?
Yeah, I think you're in a fun spot if you're T. Higgins' agent, right? You want to kind of sit there and say, hey, look, let's not end up like where Myles sits currently today, frustrated with where he is, but has a lot of cash. Like let's make sure you're again. I think we'll find more than enough teams that are interested. But what are they selling? What are we getting if we go to the Commanders and work with Terry McLaurin, be that number 1A, B, whatever it is? What does it sound like if T. Higgins is a Patriot, knowing you're going to walk right in with Drake May? Look, you're in wide receiver 1, and it's easy, But what are you selling in New England? Not the sunny weather, not the no state income tax. So you've got to figure out what are you selling. And I think for T. Higgins, I think he's going to have to decide, what's it really look like? Where's the right type of places I want to go or want to be a part of? Do the Chargers sound interesting because, they can't seem to find consistency? There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be in this T. Higgins dance. T. Higgins is going to have to kind of like start to wear things down or pare things down based off of what he really wants. And if that means taking $2 or $3 million less over time or $1 million less a year when you're in the $100 million to $200 million range, I think you should think about that. And the state income tax thing is a big piece of that puzzle too.
He's going to get paid. You're right. That's a fascinating kind of what do you sell? How do I sell my brand, our team, our quarterback with these rookies, and what do we have to offer? I wonder what Eric Bieniemy can sell now, Mark, as a guy who's back in the NFL. He's going to be the running backs coach in Chicago. He's going to be working for Ben Johnson, the first-time head coach. Bieniemy's never been a head coach. We know always wanted that. It was interesting, I guess is a word, how it ended in Kansas City. Then it went to the Commanders, and it really ended poorly there. Goes to UCLA, but he's back. Seems like he's a fire and brimstone guy in a softer, more gentler NFL. Does Eric Bieniemy have to change, or can he still be who he was to get the most out of whatever that's going to look like in the running backs room in Chicago?
I think he'll be who he was. I just think Andy Reid knew how to work with him, and the players did respond, and the players did play well. It didn't go well in Washington, clearly. Yeah. But I think putting him back in the National Football League where he's comfortable back in the running back room, to me, if I'm Ben Johnson, I just want to make sure you're happy about getting this job. Like, you don't just want a job. You're happy about getting this job and making sure that mentality of let's go to work each day, let's make these guys better, and let's do this together here in Chicago, that you're not like, man, I don't know why I got stuck here. Like, I've taken the job because I want him to want that job, and I assume he does. I have no reason not to think so. But I feel comfortable with him being back in the NFL for sure. And, just kind of see what he can do in Chicago, because it is a very interesting organization now with Ben as the head coach, to see if the Bears can finally kind of find that offense they've been looking for forever, basically.
Yeah. Well, they feel like they got the quarterback. We'll figure out what Caleb Williams turns into. But very quickly to that point, with a first-time head coach, feels like, I'm not going to say heat, but like Bieniemy does have an interesting past. Is that's okay for a first-time head coach? So, like, you're bringing him on. That's a conscious decision to hire Eric Bieniemy. You must see something in Eric that says, I want you with us on this maiden voyage.
Yeah, there must be some type of connection where they know each other, known each other, or have mutual friends where they got kind of introduced and like, this might be a good fit. It's got to be, as we all say, if you're not the head coach, you just be the head coach of the running backs, and make sure that you still respect the coordinator and respect the head coach. And if you can do those things, then boom, you know that you're a good coach. I don't think people think that Eric Bieniemy is, boy, he's a terrible coach. I don't think people say that. So now it's just a matter of, not him, but just in all coaches, right? Just like front office people, just don't disrespect the person that's signing your paychecks. We're helping you get that paycheck. And let's make sure we're all working together to get this team going in the right direction.
Yeah, if it works out well, like it did for Aaron Glenn and for Kellen Moore, you're probably going to be a head coach next year, and that's Ben Johnson. He's a prime example from coordinator up to head coach. Mark, always appreciate the time, man. Great insight as always. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening to this edition of the GM Shuffle. We'll see you back here on Thursday.